Okay. So my fellow admin, Steve DeSer, is currently a doctoral student at University of Southern California in the School of Education, which is where one of the authors of this piece that we're discussing is based. And we can blame him for this conversation today because he posted the article, and then some of you here, I think Rebecca, you're among them, who said, "Oh yeah, let's talk about this. I'll be there." So this is like really you guys' fault for this, but I think we'll have a great conversation. I was saying at the beginning, I don't think at the moment there's a need for a breakout room, but should a whole flood of people come, we'll make that happen. I just want to make sure that the conversation is rich, that there's not a lecture or anything like this. Why don't we start with, and feel free to use the chat to comment at all. It doesn't all have to be verbal, but anyone willing to Heather and I were talking, no, not Heather, Martha and I, who can't be here today, we're talking about our impressions of this piece. So anyone willing to share first just their overall thought about the piece as a whole, and then we'll dig a little deeper. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Latanya, also known as LT. I work at UCLA for first year experience, and the moderator for Empowering First Generation College Students group. All right, having said that, initial impressions about the piece.
I can say something.
Catherine, go for it.
So one thing I found interesting, and this was both in the article and I read the chapter in the book. So there is this concept of taking the first generation term off of students, and how the term can sometimes be used to evade the talk of race and ethnicity when it comes to student outcomes. So I thought that was quite interesting, since most of us have a passion for working with first-gen students. I would say most of us still use that terminology, but I thought it was quite interesting how they framed it.
Great. I want to come back to that. I want to go deeper than interesting. I want to know you all's, where do you stand on that spectrum of it? Thanks for going first, Catherine. Any other initial impressions of the piece?
I can go next. Actually, I bought the book. This is Rebecca. I work at Kansas State University. I work with first generation students, and so basically, I think the book spoke to me at different levels. But talking about equity talk versus equity walk, it was eye-opening to me how we really need to desegregate data and really focus on race, because a lot of the inequalities are based on race. And unless we start talking about race and seeing race, most likely we're not going to make progress. And I think this also fits in very well with what's going on nationally right now, right? All the injustices that we see played out in front of our own eyes through national TV. They're just right there. They're being filmed. So I think that it makes sense, but to start really desegregating the data. But the other piece is it's going to be really, really hard to convince administrators, especially when you work in historically in predominantly white universities, right? And how our systems are built from a white lens. And I think in the chapter that talked about really, getting rid of whiteness. And I think it's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take years, and maybe it's going to take another movement behind it, right? So those are my thoughts. I guess there's a lot of thoughts, but the thing that we can start doing is desegregating the data, and so that's all I'd say for now.
Oh, that's all. Definitely. I want to hear you all's experiences with disaggregated data. But let's take one other general reaction to the piece before we dig in further.
Well, I guess I can dive in. I thought it was, having just taken on this year a new job for a program that was created for, the first time I heard about it, at-risk students. And I seeing them use the terminology in that way in a program that's supposed to be very open and friendly and welcoming and supportive of a first gen student community. And I know I talked to LT a little bit about this, about the language that's used consistently, even in a university that has great programs that support student communities. It was great to see the examples, and disappointing to also know that you're seeing that every day and that you're trying to work. It's a little bit to Rebecca's point, maybe, I guess, where you're trying to figure out how to work with folks who have good intentions but maybe don't have the language or don't have the understanding or whatever it is, to be able to really work it out in a way that's going to be needed and receptive.
Yeah.
LT, one of the things I was thinking about this, the article, maybe think about a couple of days ago, I don't know, maybe a week ago, I heard with everything going on with protests and things in the news, someone referenced, or it might have been a meme, I don't know, but someone referenced the, don't tell us you're colorblind, we want you to see color, something along those lines. And it made me think that I remember growing up, like in the 90s, like saying I don't see color was the like vanguard of like liberalness and supporting equality. Like you got no better than saying I don't see color. And now to say that misses the point entirely.
Uh-huh.
And like it's the cycle of how difficult this really is and how like unending it feels. And so when I was reading this article, it made me think of the similar thing where 10 years ago, we finally identified the problem, first generation students, and we gave a name to it. And it's like, look how good we are and look at all the things we've created. And now 10 years later, it's like, this article points out, it's kind of missing the point a little bit. I don't know. So it kind of came at an interesting time with everything that I was thinking.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Well, why don't we shift into talking about how the authors problematize the term first generation. And so just as a bit of a recap, one of the things that they say is that first generation is often used, is used synonymously actually with at-risk, disadvantaged, in order to justify inequality. And so what the authors are doing is referring to practitioners, whether they're administrators, faculty, or staff, who are still learning about anti-racism. They flip the script by referring to them as first gen. So we could take apart any piece of that. Your reaction to the way they problematize the term. Do you agree with them? How are you using the terms in your organizations, in your classrooms, at your institutions? So any reactions?
I just want to move my picture down to the other Courtney because I think she and I could be a powerhouse.
You already are.
I need my Courtneys in my life. So my thought about the first gen is it's always self-reflecting because I am. I was told for many years I was not, and LT validated my thoughts. All through my higher ed work, I was like, oh, I'm first gen. And then I had someone say, you're not first gen. I'm like, oh. Then LT told me I was, so I wear it with pride. But I was not a minority student. I had means, funds. I mean, I wasn't any of the other things in that list that they string together. And I try not to lump those things together either, because I've had some pretty wealthy students in my class who were first gen. Their parents just made a living through hard work, manual labor, have built successful businesses, those types of things. So we can't assume, in my opinion, we shouldn't assume, but I think that's a lot of what's getting us in the problem that we're in today, is because we assume X, Y, and Z because you fit a certain category. I think if we just start listening better, that's my thing for everybody though. I just want them to listen better.
Thanks, Courtney. And it looks like your co-queen, Courtney's going to go next.
Yes, hello. So I'm at a high school, and I work with the first gen students here. And I was really drawn as to what the other Courtney said, was the line in here that says, for many, this is page 70, for many, this label suggests that students struggle because they cannot ask their parents how to navigate systems of higher education. We were talking last week about, how, was the school gonna like do statements about like police brutality and things. And at one point I was in the meeting and I said, well, for some of our students, being at home is a more affirming place than being here. That to be here is actually, would be the problem, right? And I think what we run into here is that just because a student cannot ask their mother or father these questions, the assumption is that there's nobody in their lives who can answer these questions, that there are no networks worthy of mention other than the ones that come from like your direct biological parent. And so, and I know this question here about how do you get to be second generation, that's really interesting to me because my grandmother eventually went to college when she was in her 50s. So my parents didn't go. Like my father had like a second grade education. So I'm like, so if she went, but they didn't go, like how does that numbering kind of work out? So again, I'm just thinking, again, like these networks that these students live in. Generation, I don't know if is the right word to get at those relationships.
Love it. I think Tanya, you had something to say, and then Beth.
Yeah, this might be slightly off topic, but the part that they were talking about, a lot of the professorate, is white, and what we're leaving out to is some of the professorate is first gen, and we don't know what we're doing, and we're learning how to be a professor from people who are our role models don't have those skills. So we're kind of pioneering this change, and we don't have the tools or the support or the role models to do that. We're forming it ourselves in these groups like this, and so we're really creating what's going to be next. And I think that that's a lot to take on, and that's the part of our jobs that nobody really sees us do. And so it becomes really overwhelming and really hard from my perspective, because I'm just like doing what I can do to like just get myself through things, and now I've got to bring all my students through things, and tired.
Yeah, I think that piece is missing from their article. Beth, and then Elizabeth.
Well, I guess I am a first-gen equity practitioner. I'm a white professor. I'm the chair of the English department at CSUN. And I found this, I have to admit, I read it several weeks ago and I haven't looked back at it until just now, but I do think that I found something really interesting about taking that term and shifting it on to basically white faculty. I'm not first gen, my mom was first gen, but I'm certainly not first gen, but I do feel like I am a first generation equity practitioner and that I am still very much in a learning phase. And I thought there was something really interesting about taking that term and actually placing it onto what is normally considered a very privileged group to talk about, what I don't know, what my hidden curriculum is right now.
Beth,
and I'm done.
Was your question when you said, how does one get to be second gen, were you referring to the faculty, the practitioners?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good question too, because they don't answer that.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like I am working on these things. I am thinking about these things. I am learning, but and I guess that the terms kind of presupposes that there are people who are no longer first gen. So what does that mean? What does that look like?
I'd love to. I'd love for us to think more about that. Elizabeth, though, you also raised your hand.
Yeah, hi. When I was thinking about how many people, students or faculty, may not realize they're first gen or they have first gen tendencies. I was thinking back to my own experience. I wouldn't have called myself first gen going through college, but I, kind of didn't think about the fact that I didn't live with the parent who went to college. I lived with a parent who did not go to college. And so I wouldn't have called myself first gen, but had someone started asking me certain questions about my experience, I would have realized, oh, I'm having a first gen experience. And I think there are probably a lot of students and maybe even faculty in that area where they're making the assumption they're not first gen, but there's a knowledge gap that they aren't aware of.
Yeah, I've definitely found that. What do you all think about that terminology of a first gen equity professional, meaning you're learning to be anti-racist, the faculty who are learning? And just like Beth's question about, well, how do you know when you're no longer learning? Or are you always first gen? Are we, there's a lot to unpack there.
I think when you think about the
Wait,
first gen
who are
plus,
you, sir? And where?
Oh,
where
I'm sorry. I'm James Stoops. I'm a first gen student. Was a first gen student. Coordinator of college access and student success. So I work with first gen students. Actually, just got off a Zoom call with about 30 of them because my bridge program is virtual this summer. So we're just beginning and kick that off. But yeah, we think about like first gen plus and all those different identities that come along with first gen, and first gen plus low income, coming from a low income family, plus gen black, all those different experiences that come with those two separate identities, and how to navigate that in a classroom, especially if you're in front of a class, and making sure that all those identities are recognized and lifted up. But also you want students to make sure that they are bringing their authentic selves to the classroom and to campus, because we want that authenticity. And a lot of times, at least where I'm at, a lot of students struggle with being their authentic selves and assimilating, and a lot of times that becomes an issue, and students kind of find themselves in a situation where they don't know, almost of imposter syndrome kind of deal, and that's when it really gets, So I think one thing I always try to do is be my authentic self, and I try to encourage faculty who are first gen, who have come up to me and say, "Hey, I'm first gen," and try to mimic that behavior when they're around students, but also when they're in the classroom, to kind of humanize themselves, but also kind of be more relatable. Being authentic doesn't take away your PhD credentials. If anything, it adds to it. So.
Thank you for that, James. And I would love to hear from some faculty in response to that, because I also hear about this idea of class passing, that it's difficult actually to share that type of background. Anyone see that or have a different experience with being authentic? Go for it, Felicia. And if you could, for everyone, just say what work you're doing as well.
Yeah. I teach at Santa Rosa Junior College, and I teach some graduate courses as an adjunct, and I wrote a book teaching it. I find that, I don't know. I think everybody's different. Faculty are different. You're who you are. And first thing I go to class to say, I'm an anti-racist. I put up the anti-discrimination policy of the college and go, yeah, that's what we're doing in classroom. In my email signature, I probably got this idea from you, LaTanya. I put undocumented ally, first generation, anti-racist. I'm such an extrovert that it's easy for me to do that. And I don't know, I don't have any problems. Like, this is who I am. I don't get political. Like, I don't say Black Lives Matter because to me that's political, but being anti-racist is just who I am. And the first gen is who I am. But I feel like I just tell people who I am, and it's just the way it is. And of course I teach math, so it's maybe different, but it works for me because of, I think, partly how I'm put together. Like, I'm sure that I don't know what people do who are introverted or private, who are faculty members. But for me, I just tell it like it is, but that is kind of who I am. So I think that really, I noticed, like, I start with my slides, you know, like, oh, my brother went to prison, my sister's a felon, whatever, like all these things about me. I have a disability, I have mental health issues, but I work at a community college where that makes the students all of a sudden feel like they like me or something, makes me connected with them. Maybe it's just because of stories, I don't know, but it really does work for me in the classroom as a faculty member. But again, like I said, I have a lot of students who are formerly incarcerated or are first gen or maybe have mental health issues, or I don't know if everyone does it at all the colleges, but anyway, so I think that really connects me to students and it works with my personality style.
Thanks for sharing. And Courtney wanted to jump in.
Because I always want to jump in. I'm a speech teacher at Amarillo College. I've been in higher ed since '96, but teaching for 4 years now. So this is a textbook, it's a class that we're taking as faculty as a cohort. It's called The Pedagogy of Real Talk. It's by Paul Hernandez. And one of the things that I'm really taking away, I don't particularly love the book, so caveat, but I do love his experience. He was a gang member in California. I want to say LA, but I could get that wrong. But he had multiple experiences with not great opportunities and was really afraid of college. But one of the big things in the book is you have to learn how to have real conversations with your students. And it can always come back to the curriculum, but we just have those real conversations. So when we start the classes, because I teach communication, my job is to listen, and my job is not to judge, and my job is just to hear, but teach them to do the same thing. So as the semester progresses, they assume more and more that I'm just this white lady who didn't know anything, which I don't. But our stories begin to unfold. And I go, oh yeah, I got shot at one night. You what? Oh yeah. And so we tell that story. And it's just a drop in the bucket. And then I go, oh yeah, I had a friend executed on death row. You what? And as these stories begin to mold and they learn about where I grew up, they come into my office and they divulge things that they would never divulge. So you have to just be able to, my daughter and my husband are both introverts, speaking to the point of introverts. Everybody has their own authentic, and James, I loved how you said authentic is where we have to be. If you try to be me, it's going to be wrong. It's not going to work. If you try to be LT, it's not going to work. We have to be who we are. And we all know how to be gracious. We all know how to be kind. And my perception is those are the most important things that we can offer any college student. But it's imperative that we offer those things to students who are questioning whether or not they have value and worth and whether they should be here to begin with. Because all of us in this conversation right now had at least one point in college where like, this ain't for me. I'm out of here. So I don't know. That's just how I do it. But Pedagogy of Real Talk. And if you just want the page numbers, I'll tell you the page numbers.
I see Tanya and then Erica. And I just wanted to add to maybe bring some nuance to it that I wonder what are the costs of, let's say, a Black male professor sharing that kind of information, how it would be read and all that. But Tanya and then Erica.
Yeah, I was just going to echo that too, that I am really open with my students and, you know, tell them my whole life story when appropriate, you know, but I teach everything from 350-person introductory bio courses to 15-person field courses where we spend 2 months at a field station doing research. So I have a really wide range of interactions with students at different levels of their college career. And same thing, I find that just by being really real and upfront and telling them about my current life and my past life and everything, that they open up to me sometimes. And sometimes I'm like, whoa, that's a lot to take just now. I mean, literally 5 minutes before this call, a student came and turned in an assignment to me and told me some of his life story. And I was just like, okay, well, that's that's pretty intense, so, and just thanking me for being real with him and making him feel comfortable that he can share that with. And I don't know if he's ever shared that with a professor before, right? So I think that being able to be open like that does a huge service to our students, that most people aren't doing, and it makes a huge difference for them, and it makes them feel like they belong here. So that's good.
Yeah, especially in the sciences or STEM fields, we kind of expect it in social science and STEM humanities to some degree.
Oh yeah, no, scientists don't talk about their feelings.
Yeah, exactly. Y'all don't have feelings,
do that.
right?
We don't have those. It's not logical.
Erica, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'm a faculty member in a sociology department at Cal Poly Pomona. Those of you outside of California, it's a California State school in the LA area. And so I'm thinking about this, right? And I think that some of the ideas in here were interesting. Like what spoke to me was kind of even thinking about your syllabus and how you construct your syllabus to be accessible for students, and started me thinking about, my teaching and pedagogy in that way. But as we're in this conversation and what folks are bringing up, y'all are bringing up interesting points. And I'm thinking about, I just feel that there's so many faculty I come across that just don't get it. Like, I'm thinking about this article, right? I'm reading it and I'm like, this is great, but a lot of the people that I work with, to be quite honest, do not have race consciousness at all. I don't even know if they have a first gen consciousness. Like, and I teach at a school that has majority first gen students of color, predominantly Latino, Latinx, and Asian American, probably the next highest group, and then African American students and so on. So it's an issue for me, because I've sat on committees with people. I mean, I've been on committees with administrators who have, like, I've said, what about transfer students? What about first gen? Well, transfers is not really where the problem is. It's freshmen you got to worry about. And I'm like, oh, so transfers just don't have any issues? Because that's not the transfers that I'm seeing. You know what I mean? So anyhow, that's all a way to say that. I don't know that there's any quick answers, but I know there's a lot of statements coming out relative to Black Lives Matter and transformation, that statements, right, around this. But what can we do? I'm thinking in a practical way. This is where I become kind of frustrated. Like, I want more practical change, or I want people to read this and sort of get it, because it's amazing to me how many of our faculty are working with these populations and they have no idea who our students
are. 100%. Love to get to the practical part. Beth had her hand raised. Matt, I saw you do something. I didn't know if you had wanted to chime in. All right, go ahead, Beth, first. Are you on mute, Beth?
I'm sorry, I missed the previous person's name.
Erica.
Erica. Yes, I'm also in the Cal States, in the same system as Erica. And yeah, there are a lot of faculty who don't get it. And then I think what's especially troubling to me right now, as I'm trying to work with my faculty, are the ones who think they do. Like they really think they do. And yet I've been trying to talk a lot about equity practices for our online teaching in the fall, and I can't tell you what kind of pushback I'm getting, and sort of, there's a way in which some do and some don't. And the ones who think they do are in some ways harder to deal with than the ones who just don't and don't care that they don't. The other thing I wanted to say, and I guess this is on the practical end as well, is one of the things near the end of the piece that we were reading talks about acquiring effective equity-minded competence. And I guess, what follows then are descriptions of people who are trying to do this and what qualities and characteristics they seem to have. But the question of, what does it mean to have effective equity-minded competence? Like who's measuring that, and what's the measure of that? And I guess for me personally, at this period of time, it's like I don't know if I'm doing enough or if I'm doing the right things, or, you know, and I really want to be doing the right things. So end of
Love it.
that.
Yes, love it. Matt, no, you good? Go for it.
Yeah. I was just going to really quick say, so Erica, when you're talking about the faculty side, and how many of your colleagues just don't have this equity mindedness, and I think probably all of us have a lot of that in our lives. It made me think, so, you know, my background is in financial aid, so I sort of straddle this line between, you know, student affairs, enrollment management, but then also like working with treasury and student accounts and bursars. And, you know, I think a lot of people on this call and our realm and like the student affairs side, this is what we talk about. But then when you get over to things like the treasury service, or, you know, even further away from the student experience, like procurement or like student athletics or the rec center, those things don't underlie a lot of the work they do. And so when we're bringing these up in larger conversations, like a staff council meeting, or when the chancellor, the president is pushing these things, it doesn't resonate because people aren't having those conversations every single day like a lot of us are. So I think that's another when we're talking about the systemic and sort of the structural piece that we have to recognize.
Yes, love it. Thank you for sharing that, Matt. I'm wondering if we could also begin to unpack this concept of disaggregating data as a way to weaponize against this. And Rebecca had mentioned it at first. So the authors argue that we have to actually pay attention to race. And they gave examples of you might note disparities, but so it was multiple points to that. So first of all, don't just look as a whole, like start to pay close attention. Don't make negative assumptions about what you find about the data. Did that resonate with anyone, this idea of disaggregation? Valerie, go for it.
Hi, and my name is Val Shepard. I work at UCLA in recreation, and I just want to build on what Matt and Erica said, and then also going back to, you know, Rebecca's point and LT, your point about the data. And that was something that really resonated with me with the article, because there's so much data that is newly available, institutional data that either people haven't looked at or they're not aware of that's available on their campus, or there might only be a few people who have access to it. And it's like, how do you decide who sees the data? What are you using the data for? I've been on student affairs committees, and Heather and I have been on, I'm thinking of the Students with Dependence Task Force we were on last year. A lot of that data had never been looked at before, you know, literally never been looked at before. And it was like, oh, okay, it's sitting there, you know, and then no faculty on the committee, you know, only student affairs people. So, and then it's like, how do you decide, okay, you're going to disaggregate it, and then how to disseminate it and what's important. And you're making the best decisions you can, but it's like having a toolkit that would help you walk through. Like, that's a piece that I really appreciated at the end of the article. It's like, here's some really practical things you can do to begin this work. And it was aimed toward faculty, but also for student affairs practitioners. The training we get is, you know, a lot of it is either on our own time or it's hit and miss. Some people have a ton of training and some people don't have none. And some people it's because they're interested in it, and other people don't even have the access to the professional development to go get it. So that piece just really, really resonated with me. It's like, and more data is becoming available. That's what we're doing in recreation. It's like all of a sudden we have all the card swipe data and we can match it up with it. So it's like 5 years ago, it didn't even exist. But then how do you translate that to doing, like making sure that you're allowing for access and you're using the data in an ethical way?
Thank you so much for sharing, Val. Heather, go ahead.
Well, it should be noted that Val's work, because of the conscientious, like looking at the data and ability for you to communicate it to that task force, UCLA just announced that student parents are now going to have priority enrollment next year. And so that's exactly because Val was able to take that data, communicate it to a group of people, get that out to other people who actually are who make the decisions, not just the boots on the ground advocates, but the folks who could see the data, hear what we're communicating. So I just want to really give a shout out to y'all, because that's been a long time coming and a lot of energy and work, and you really did that beautifully. And it's a great example of how this toolkit, or this looking at this lens in a way similar to some of the things they bring up in the article, can have really great impact.
Yeah. Anyone else have a positive example of seeing disaggregated data work well in the service of equity? I know, Courtney, I'm trying. I'm always a glass half full person. I got to.
Well, that's the question. I was going to post the question. I have access to all the data for my students, and it is broken down by, man, I could go into everything. It's like SPSS. I'm a speech teacher. Y'all have some grace with me, but like, I can break it down. I can look at male versus female. I can look at dual credit. I can look at ethnicity. I can look at everything. What do I do with it? Anybody?
Anybody have any thoughts?
Because every year I get evaluated on how these people are doing. I'm like, okay, great. I can see that this one semester, African-American males did really great in my class. Is it because I had 3 really great ones? Or did I do something really well? I don't know.
That's a great question. Yeah.
I want to do better, but I'm like, I don't know what to do. Okay, anybody, I'll shut up now.
Rebecca's going next.
Well, I'm wondering, you're a teacher, right? You're a professor? Okay. So, and I guess, I realized I hadn't read the article, but I read the book from the same, and that's something that something you could do is kind of unpack, get your data, and maybe have some of your colleagues gather data and kind of unpack and share stories, and say, yes, these are the things that I did, these are the things that I didn't do, and maybe try to establish patterns that way. I guess that would be my suggestion, right? Maybe share with your department, or just to look at things, because it could be a combination of things.
Yeah, we teach 8-week semesters. So by the time I've gotten the data, I've had 3 semesters worth of students.
Dang.
So I think I need to, to respond to that, I need to be better at note keeping about what did I do in this class that impacted people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If anybody has a formatting to do that, y'all, I'm open to anything. I'm speech major again. I'm just like, hi, everything's great.
Go ahead, Erica.
Like you have a great, it's great material to do study, right? And share with others for best practices. So your data may say, the Latinx students are not performing as well. Maybe it was in the spring. So maybe something was happening in the spring. Maybe it has something to do with the DACA decision. I don't know, maybe there were other things that were affecting. So I don't know, it sounds like you have opportunity to develop a lot of studies and uncover a lot of stuff, and maybe even discover some patterns.
And then Erica wanted to chime in.
Yeah, so I think, and Hoining just brought it up on the chat, actually. I was going to say this, was that doing midterm reviews with your students, midterm evals. Sometimes, again, this is not going to get at may not be able to disaggregate where every single group is in your class, but kind of will give you a sense of where students are, what things might need to be changed, what challenges they're encountering, if there's certain patterns you notice. I mean, it can be anonymous even, right? But it would help you to get a sense of maybe if you're in the interest of equity, what are some changes you can make to try to do it.
Yeah, because we walk into so we do fall 1, fall 2 break, spring 2, spring 1, summer. Y'all, spring, we are just dragging them through. So this past spring, we had COVID, no employment, and you're going to take all your classes online. our rates went up, our pass rates went up. Y'all, I was on the computer 24 hours a day, I swear to God. No, it was really more like 12, but it was forever. Is that what it's going to take? I don't know, y'all.
Tanya, you're unmuted. Does that mean you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say something about STEM. So when a few years ago, we undertook this huge project to redo all of our curriculum for the intro biology sequence, and used a lot of evidence-based research or, teaching practices of to completely change the way we taught the courses. And they're supposed to, help to bridge that gap between our less prepared and our more prepared students. And so we get a lot of pushback from the students who are like, I can already do all this, but from the students who had typically been struggling through these courses, the idea is we're going to see huge improvements. And so some of my colleagues have been doing a lot of the educational research to go along with this. But it takes time to see if what you've been doing for 3 years is actually working at all, if it's worth the huge amount of effort that we've been putting in to redo all of this. And then the other thing is, I think that in some cases they have been able to get some of the demographic and disaggregated data. In some cases they haven't. But the other thing is, so we can follow them when they're actually in this series of courses, which is 3 quarters. But then we want to know, does that help them in their 3rd year and their 4th year? Are we seeing better outcomes throughout? And it's really hard to be able to track that progress, right? So it's a really hard question to answer. Even when you have a whole team working on it. And so you can do all of the best practices, evidence-based pedagogy, and it might not even be working. So,
Catherine, and then I wanted to add a critique that I have of this piece, but Catherine, you go first.
I was going to mention towards the end, talking about how for equity-minded competence that they do not accept best practices or high-impact practices unconditionally. And so, yes, I know that we've heard people mention best practices and high-impact practices, but it mentioned how it can be vulnerable to whiteness. And so for myself as a student affairs representative, I always have to think about, why are we recommending internships and these great things, study abroad, that are very costly, and usually assume that students have that money and can afford to do that. So I do still agree that there's research behind why they're best practices, but it's also good to still be critical and question, why are we recommending these to students?
Absolutely. And then also, can we give Catherine a hand? She just started a new position in Northern Arizona University, and she drove across the country to get there. So kudos to you getting a job during COVID, girl.
Thank you.
Cider and Tub, you got a NAU lumberjack over here. Congratulations, Catherine.
I did want to, this is going to shift the conversation a little bit. My critique of this piece is the representation of, or lack thereof, of Asian American identity. So there's a point in which they say, oh, it's not just white professors who are doing this, that we can't assume that they name Black, Latinx, and Indigenous folks have all of the tools. And then the example that they give is an Asian American person in this. And so I wanted to know if anyone else picked up on that, or your thoughts about Asian American identity in this piece. And if not, I can keep going on about the topic. So one of the challenges, this is a theme that I'm becoming even more interested in and working with students on, is particularly where Asian American students fall on the first gen spectrum. So we tend to, the go-to tends to be Black and Latinx, and then Asian Americans, as is typical of many other, in many other cases, left out of the conversation altogether, or if anything, skewed toward whiteness and somehow not, and sort of like apolitical. So I actually see this piece actually reaffirming that of Asian Americans being a model minority or somehow upholding whiteness. And one of our challenges in terms of disaggregating data at UCLA is actually paying more attention to Asian American students. And also noting that there are differences, like Asian American, such a broad category that spans continents, right? Is who are these students and what are their particular needs? So Filipino students, for example, or even the definition of first gen, if it's your parents, if we say a student whose parents received a degree outside the US does not qualify as first gen, you're actually going to be excluding a critical mass of Asian American students. But if your mom got a nursing degree in the Philippines, we all know that that cultural capital doesn't necessarily travel with it. So that's my own personal passion right now. Didn't know if anyone had picked up on it at all or noticed it from the piece.
I want to talk.
Yes,
so
Courtney.
Amarillo has had a big COVID crisis, and it's mostly been relegated to our new immigrant community because they work at a meatpacking plant. But there was a BuzzFeed article done about our situation, and one of the poignant things that you just brought up in my mind is there is this white doctor standing next to a black doctor, but this man received his education in Africa before he was immigrated to the United States. He is left to be an interpreter. As an advisor in my past life, I just thought that was a travesty. To get those transcripts, that y'all want to talk about something we all can work on, it's that right there. Because we need nurses. The body is the body is the body. I don't care where you are. There are CEUs we can do to catch people up if we need to because of years, time, whatever. That is a travesty.
Erica.
I think it's important what you're bringing up, and I also think it's interesting that universities often don't disaggregate Asian and Asian American.
Sure.
I think that's a difference, and that's not to imply that if you are from an Asian country and you've immigrated here and you're teaching here, for example, that you can't be race conscious, right, or work well with first gen students. But I think there is definitely a difference, right, between, and I think that difference in experience, difference in background that people are bringing to the table, right? And so I think that it's important that like Asian American faculty are sort of identified, right? And sort of, and that sort of data may be further disaggregated because there's a large number, tends to be in a lot of research universities in particular, a higher number of Asian faculty, immigrants from Asian countries as opposed to Asian American faculty. And I think that those experiences are qualitatively different. And students need to know that there are people maybe like them. If you're an Asian American student that was born and raised here and you may have particular sets of experiences, there's faculty or staff you can go to maybe that might share some of those experiences potentially.
And then, it's, well, Ashley, you're off mute. Did you want to add something? No. Okay, Erica, tying back to something you brought up earlier, because again, I'm always a hopeful person. Anyone have examples that they've seen, heard of, or used themselves of like anti-racist practices that are a result of race consciousness or as a result of having disaggregated data? Because I don't want us to just be completely sad, right? But also, but in all seriousness, I think it's just helpful to hear anything that you've seen working. Jonathan is literally looking out the window. That's how bad it is.
I'm trying to think of a good example. I don't think there's enough, or maybe we don't hear about them enough.
Well, Elizabeth raised her hand, so let's see if she can help us out.
Hi, everybody. And just really quickly, I'm at Academic Impressions, so I run professional development for higher ed folks. So I'm not at an institution. I'm not working directly with students or faculty. So just to explain that perspective, but we recently ran a webcast on the power of telling your story and being able to mark for yourself, really key points in your lives and key skills that you uniquely have because of the story that you have. And she talked about working with students in that way and helping students to see who would so quickly say, I'm missing so much, I have all these deficits because of X, Y, and Z in my life. But that there was the story writing piece that became a part of their armor almost. No, actually, I've overcome all these things, or I have these skills because X, Y, and Z happened in my life. So that was very positive for me, is to hear her talk about that story writing with students and how that's part of our pedagogy.
Yeah, I've heard similar things along those lines. I wonder, I think this is where Estella Bensimon would encourage people to think about this practice of demanding students put their video on. And what does that say about equity? Who are the students that aren't? And the question is, who's not doing that, right? And what might that mean for those students? I think sometimes there's an assumption made that students are being disrespectful or things like that, but just inquiring more is the point. And is it falling along racial lines, and what is the meaning behind that if that's the case? Any other examples, Courtney?
So we use a lot of data at Amarillo College. We are weird. I know we're weird, but we have a data guru, and we feed him well, right? But we rely totally on that data. And that data is showing us that we are, in fact, making changes to our students. We are being beneficial to the things that we're doing. So when we look at practices that our college has implemented over the past 5 years, 8 years, they are data driven. So because of that, Russell Lowry Hart is our president, and he always tells us we don't have the college. The college we have is the college we built. So the results we're getting are the results we want. So wait.
Say that again. Say that again.
Yeah, it's hard to say because the college we have is the college we built, and we have the results. The results are based on what we built, so we want those results. Okay, he says it much more eloquently.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense.
So we've had to reframe everything we do, because when we first started this process of really being data focused, we were at maybe 18% graduation rates and like an abysmal 5% transfer. Horrific. Now we're almost to 70% graduation and transfer rates. We have really worked hard. We didn't quite hit our benchmark of 2020 being 70%, but we have flip-flopped everything based on data. So when we talk about disaggregating data, we can do it, but your administration has to have the tools and the mindset to do it. But if that doesn't happen, we've just shown in this group, when Heather was talking about, we were able to let parents register first. That's the data playing a role in actively. So we as individuals, I'm a big fan of the individual. What can I do to move the needle forward for this student, for this experience, for this? So while data drives us, it's still us who end up at the end of the day doing the work.
That was deep. We're still thinking about the college we have as the college we built. We're still back there.
Girl, no, you got to come forward.
I know.
What do you want?
It makes sense.
I don't know if this is a best practice, but in terms of the positivity, this spring, I'm pretty lucky because I have a college learning community. So I had these students for 30 weeks. We worked together building community before we went online. So keep all of that in mind. There are already students who want to be together, want to share, are sharing their stories for a whole year. But the feedback in the focus groups that we did, and I'm just coding the data, haven't really even started, but it consistently is just naming it, like giving us space to talk about what's going on, naming the, like, you know, racism or what's happening in the world, giving a space and a place to talk about it, even if it's just silence. Students consistently in their feedback just loved the fact that somebody like opened up a space to talk about it, or just said, hey, this is going on, because there were a lot of classes or a lot of meetings and happenings where no one was mentioning anything, or they're just kind of going through with the agenda. So I don't know if for students it would seem to be important, at least for this group of students, to have a space where they could really just talk with each other and share each other's thoughts, or just be quiet together, if that was what it was going to be. So that was something that worked or had a positive influence, at least this quarter.
I'm wondering if people would be willing to share a matter, a problem that you've seen at your own institution, your own area of work, that you feel is somehow tied to racism, or could use an anti-racist focus. So this isn't, I'll share one first. This isn't necessarily specific to UCLA, but as many of you know, I've also been a part of a Black First Gen awareness movement, and recently wrote a blog post about the work, all the intellectual work that first gen students do prior to coming to college, typically in the form of educating family, neighbors, or whatever about college. And then when moments like this happen, the work that they're doing to educate the campus, right? And one of the ways, and I was talking to some folks at a different institution, and I said, is there a way in which you can offer independent study credit for the work that those students are doing, or service learning credit to actually help facilitate the things that because the students are going to do it, we know that, and then what happens is because they're taking extra workloads, it impacts time to degree, it fosters burnout and all that. So why not change our practices to assist them with that? But anyhow, would anyone be willing to share some other issue that they'd like to see addressed? Felicia, go ahead.
I just want to, because of what you said, reminded me of that. Like, I never thought about that. Like, the students are also doing that extra work of educating people about first gen, or about what it means to be Black in the world, et cetera. And it just reminded me that a lot of studies out there about faculty. I'm so faculty focused because that's what I am. But the idea that like faculty of color and first gen faculty do so much more heavy lifting. And even though I'm not a faculty of color, I'm white, I find that I'm always writing letters of recommendation to probation and parole. I'm at a community college for residency, and I'm writing all these letters on the weekends, and I'm always mentoring students, like even after they leave, years later, I'm like, oh, and I'm white, but and then people, I'm sure that faculty of color are being hit upon, and that's what the research was showing, that faculty of color are doing all this extra work. And so when I do my tenure process thing, that portfolio thing, it's different at a community college, mostly teaching, I always put that in there. And I feel like along with the idea, I think that's kind of this idea of the college is what we have. We built it that way, and it gets these outcomes because that's the way we want it. And so they build these colleges that have campuses and traditions and systems that don't reward the faculty for doing this extra work, or those students for doing that extra work. And that does need to be institutionalized, like you said, in the form of like a degree or portfolio or independent study. And for faculty, it needs to be integrated into the tenure process. So like,
absolutely,
certain people aren't tapped out because they're going to do it, right? Most faculty of color, I mean, it's just research shows that, and that they're doing more work. They're doing more of that heavy lifting and mentoring and saving and high end, kind of high emotional work that takes a lot out of you.
Uh-oh. Dang it, Felicia, you're on a roll. while we're waiting for Felicia to come back, at some point, maybe not on this call, I need to hear about these letters for parole. Okay, that is a whole, I'm serious. I don't think people talk about that. I don't even know what that means, but maybe we can get back to it.
Like it's weird to write a letter for a college recommendation.
And it's a whole letter. It's not a form you're filling out.
No, like doing a parole letter is normal. Doing a recommendation letter to get into another college is weird.
There you go. It bugged me out.
People need to write about that. Okay, I'm gonna bug you about that.
I'm done.
Well, Felicia, you were amazing. You were amazing. Did anyone else want to share anything? Oh, go, Huining, hey, babe. What's up, man?
Hey, so I just really wanted to
there you go. I stopped my video
along with the comments that were just made, because I just was like nodding furiously. And I've been at, like, I want to say this may be my fourth institution by choice since UCLA. And I feel like that's always the conversation about the faculty of color, white, very invested and very, committed, doing all of this, physical labor, emotional labor that is simply like not recognized. And so it's interesting, right, when you're thinking about tenure and promotion and like research, teaching, and service, so much of what these particular faculty are doing in terms of the mentoring, it is teaching. And so much about what these faculty are doing in terms of supporting student organizations or student groups or anything of that nature is service. And yet the institutions, all of mine, like public, private, small, large, like I've been at all of them, and they just continue to recognize the things that they've always recognized. And so, like clearly institutions are the slowest to respond of like all organizations that exist, right? Because you think about like corporations, I don't love the fact that it's the bottom line that drives their change, but hey, at some point it's just like, okay, if that's going to drive the change, like I was just saying to another UCLA graduate from my program, like we'll just take it at this point because we need things to change. Institutions like have like no need to change, like even though like literally every single day you are like largely old white men, like consistently we're saying that, and yet no, we don't feel like changing. We clearly know what we're doing. You clearly do not know what you're doing, and you're falling behind, like everybody, you're falling behind the world, and yet you're supposed to be like these institutions of like higher education helping society move forward. So it's just like, again, archaic ways of being. And so many of what folks are doing, okay, let's go categorize it, put it in the teaching, put it in the service, at least it gets recognized. But institutions like blatantly deny their responsibility.
When she speaks, she drops the mic, y'all. Thank you. And I also wanted to point out the great vocabulary terms that Heather and Erica put into the chat. Cultural taxation, invisible labor, all important ways to name what it is that's being experienced. Any other?
This isn't a new thought, but it's just going on to the student part. We're encouraging them to advocate. We're asking them, like, fight for funding, fight for priority enrollment, like do the work. And we're literally putting the work on them, like asking them to do it. And I love this idea that we could give them, like, they need to be getting credit. I mean, luckily, they're also growing and developing and learning leadership skills and learning about politics and dynamics. So they're learning, but like, we're not really helping them in any way do that. Or hopefully we are in this room guiding it. But yeah, I'm fired up too. It makes me just really angry because, yeah, go ahead.
I just also want to say that we as institutions are not remotely modeling to our students like what we're like saying to them. Like we say these things, we're like, do these things, and like we don't do them at all as individuals. Not this group, not individual, but like as individuals. We're certainly not doing it as institutions. And then it's like all lip service and hypocrisy, which is like the worst part. Like, we as institutions should model for our students how we should be, you know, adding to society. And yet we're not. Like, we're like, again, blatantly not.
Y'all just come work for AC. Come on. Everybody just apply.
Come to Amarillo.
Yeah, we do Culture Caring Day. We do, I mean, y'all, come. We're going to have a lot of food.
Go ahead, Erica.
I think the other thing too is that, like, if we're gonna, and I love your idea of LT about like giving students credit for what they're already sort of doing. And I think like the other thing too is that what I've noticed is that there'll be forums about diversity, particularly if there's like instances around microaggressions, then they want to call these like forums. And I didn't go to the last one at my campus, but another faculty I know of color went and said that students were getting up there and speaking very real truths. These are Black students who are a very small population on our campus, talking about their experiences. And there have been several incidents, and that some people that were up on the stage who were administrators, white folks, were crying, pulled the tears thing, and basically said like, but we have this, but we have that. So like, what's your beef? Like, what's your problem? And it was just really, I think, disheartening for the students, you know, and the faculty member I know that was there was very, you know, disheartened by the whole thing. And, you know, so I just think like there have to be ways in which, if universities are going to call spaces for dialogue, then there really has to be not just listening, but then actual, like, let's move forward with some practical application here. And I think that was a major issue, and it's still an ongoing issue for, I think, on our campus, is like, how do we support students, particularly Black students on our campus who were encountering some serious microaggressions from administrators, et cetera.
Courtney, Marshall, and then James. I don't know if James wanted it.
Well, one thing I've been thinking about, so to go to your first question, LT, one of the questions for us, so I'm at a boarding school, and so kids, they want to come back in the fall, and so we're trying to think about how do you do dorm duty, so how do you interact with kids in the dorm? So if kids are so one of the meetings we were talking about, so do you go into their rooms, make sure they're okay? And I was saying, well, you have to be careful, because when you do that with some kids, they're going to feel overly policed. And if you don't go in and check on them, they're going to feel like they're being ignored. So again, like, it was just, and the people at the meeting were like, wow, I didn't think of it that way. I was like, well, yes, that's a good thing to do. But one thing that's really getting me, because we keep having these forums and they're horrible. They're always horrible. And I've been trying to think about why they're horrible. One, because it's usually not the right person either delivering the news, or it's the wrong people making the decisions. But I think, and please tell me if I'm wrong, that one of the things about, I guess, power and white supremacy is like, the white people feel like they can do this on their own. They can be all things to non-white kids without non-white adults there. And when I first got here, it always struck me that not for all of our kids, but for some, like, you take them out of these communities with people who love them the most, right? And you put them in this, like, you bring them to New Hampshire, Exeter, New Hampshire, and it's like, go for it, right? And so that when they connect with teachers, and also I like what you were doing at UCLA with staff members, like the folks in dining services, the custodians. So when they see those adults not being treated well, one, it's like, well, so what does that mean for me? But the longer, and this is my 4th year, and I'm gonna be a new associate dean in the fall, that really strikes me, it's this kind of, what made you think that you can be this to those kids, right? And the fact that you don't, not even want to, because Lord knows they're never going to defer to the leadership, that's fine. But even to partner with folks who might know a little something about the environment, or a little something about these kids, or like you're saying, the people who have undergone microaggressions, like what might they be able to bring to that conversation, that someone who can say, you know, I've never had that experience, right? You know, why might they partner? And I say this too because this is my 3rd year. I've been the dorm head. We have an all gender dorm on our campus. And so when I think about the amount of shutting up and learning and listening and not being the center and not being in charge that I had to do to even think I could begin to consider being the dorm head for these kids was astounding. So when I watch these people say, oh, I read Kendi's book and now I'm ready to come back in the fall and make it happen for these kids, I can't believe it, but I can believe it, but that's that. So I think everybody, well, they're saying they're anti-racist, but.
James, did you want to say something?
I did, but I was listening to Courtney. I was like, yeah.
we were all listening to Courtney.
And I mean, I was just thinking, because in regards to being anti-racist, just imagine if the murder of George Floyd had happened and students were on campus. We were in the middle of spring semester, and George Floyd was murdered, and to see. And what I tell people, like, we're not living in a historical moment. This is a historical movement. And students are, young folks in generally are empowered to act. And COVID-19 and the current climate has, in many cases, exposed the inequities on campus, socioeconomic. You go back and look at mediocre diversity statements that are bolstered on the page, and then your college issues a new statement. I'm like, hey, wait, I thought we were already doing. Oh, we're not doing that. Hey, that building's named after So like all these things are coming to the light of like what the college has not been doing, and students are starting to correlate those inequities to their own personal experience as a student. So students are going to, and I've told folks, I work at a small liberal arts college in South Carolina, and I've been telling folks, like, when students come back in August, we're talking about coming back in August, that all that's going to come with them. Like, this movement is still going, and students are going to come back with this. Students email me a couple of times a week, and the cultural taxation, definitely, I want to be there for students. That first week after George Floyd's murder was I was in a different place. I didn't, place I'd never been before. But at the same point, I wanted to be there for my students, and I felt like I was letting them down because at the time I didn't have anything to give them. But I mean, I'm in a better place now, so I'm helping them work out their frustrations and their emotions. But all that's going to come full circle when students come back in the fall, across the country. But as you read the statements, they can't be blanking anymore. Students are reading every word and every period, and they're putting exclamation points on them, and they're making their own statements. And so this work will continue, beyond 2020, as we go into uncharted territories with physical distancing. I don't say social distancing because we're not distant, we're just physically distant. And I'm gonna shut up.
No, those are some amazing nuggets there. And two things I wanted to respond to is, like, students will circle your stuff, they will screenshot it, circle it, and refresh and tell you everything that you did wrong in your statement. Their literacy is really high when it comes to that. I just wanted to share a thing that Heather and I were going back and forth on. And so the policy of pass, no pass, which we think is a neutral policy, which is absolutely anything but. And what we are finding, and we kept trying to figure out who is taking advantage of this pass, no pass policy. And we only have anecdotal data. We don't have actual data. But what we do know, first-gen students of color are less likely to take to utilize pass, no pass, which was meant to support them, meant to say, hey, have another option. But we always find, like, the more advantaged students actually, because they can ask a parent about this. It's really hard if you're first gen, for example, to go to a parent and say, should I take this class, pass, no pass? What are they going to tell you? You got this because you made it that far, mijo, or you got this because you're strong. And so that's not really helpful in that situation, whereas maybe taking a class, pass, no pass, would actually ease some of your burdens a little bit. But it was great that Heather working in college academic counseling and me working on the student affairs side in this instance, we're able to come together to really unpack that a little bit more and explain the policy more for the students as well. Yeah, Erica?
And just to add to that real quick, it just had me also thinking about in our department, in addition to the pass no pass thing becoming an issue where students didn't really know what to do, and we also do advising. So some students emailed me directly, but I don't think everybody knew. When I looked at the roster, yeah, only a few, like a handful of students out of my 200 plus like actually did it. But that all being said, and there's also financial aid stuff tied to pass no pass, which is also another inequity.
It is and it isn't at the same time, but go ahead. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So there's stuff with that, but let me just also say, it reminds me also of we have part-time faculty in our department, a lot of part-time people. And what we were finding is that some of the part-time folks were worried about keeping their job. So they actually got harder on the students when we went remote, or they kept things the same. So so then we had the department was sending out then notifications to them saying, hey, kind of pull back, it's okay, this isn't going to count against you. But even like university rules about like how they get evaluated, how those adjuncts get evaluated came out very late in the game, like late in April when we were almost over. So anyhow, that's another layer to this, right? And thinking about COVID, thinking about now virtual instruction in the fall, how do we make things equitable and make sure faculty, staff are on the same page, and then the students have the info.
I'm so Tanya's gonna go next. I'm so glad you brought up the adjuncts though.
I had that because so I'm a full-time teaching faculty. I don't do research, and I was hired to be here long term, but my contract doesn't say that. So I should be worried about losing my job, but I made the decision that I was going to do what was best for my students. But I had them come to me and just tell me, like, they were just so stressed because their chemistry professor decided to make it twice as hard because he knew they were going to cheat at home. And their so-and-so gave them an extra paper because they had time because they were at home. And I did the opposite. So like my exams were open notes. I ended up canceling the final. There was a lot of things that I did to make it easier because they would come to me and tell me how they were struggling and what was hard and why. And so, but I've gotten in trouble for doing stuff like that before. I'm always the one who will bend the rules to accommodate a student's special situation, and I've gotten in trouble from administration for doing that. So but I keep doing it anyway.
And Tanya, I don't know, as you were talking, there are like other examples of craziness. Courtney Millison mentions one Spanish faculty member gave more required lab time. Wait, say it, Courtney. What would they do?
More speaking lab.
She's damn fool. So she assumed because she had all this time that the students would have all this time, so they could just get online and practice speaking with their partner. So one of my colleagues' husband was in the class, and he worked full time during the pandemic because he was the manager and there was no one else to work. And then he came home and did more work than what was initially required in the syllabus. Y'all, I gave my students a COVID opt-out. I said, you can pick one of the last 2 assignments. You pick, I don't care. Do it.
Yeah.
They were like, seriously? I'm like, yeah, you have to fill out this form. If you don't, you get to do both. Sorry. But we should have been more transparent about what that meant to faculty, because I think a lot of us are still flying blind because we've done it for 8 weeks maybe, but my students, I could see the equity gaps. I could see them. I could put, when you're in my classroom, you're all equal, right? Because you all have a paper, pencil, and a textbook. When I can see that you're not logging on because you're at work, or you're at work while you're logged on, or, you could see them.
Yeah. I had a student, I literally, we had a one-on-one Zoom and a shared Google Doc, and we made her a schedule because she couldn't figure out how to manage it. And I was like, well, let's just meet. And so I still probably have access to her Google Calendar because we sat down together and like did it together because she was so overwhelmed, first gen student, CAE student as well. And and that's what I tried to tell the students too when they were just so, I'm like, I get it. I'm overwhelmed. I'm like, this is hard for me. I can only imagine to be 20, 21, 22 years old, what I was like then trying to do this. Like, it's fine. We'll figure it out. You just have to talk to me. And they were like, okay. So I got talked to a lot.
Yeah. She was driving Uber with her two girls in the car with her. And then she would finish that, and then she would go to her other job. And she was trying to squeeze my class in. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yep, absolutely. Erica had mentioned in the chat 2 examples of faculty actually penalizing students for not having their cameras on. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, but it just kind of is what it is.
Faculty penalizing students, assuming that they weren't engaged. Some classes were meeting at 7 in the morning. Because that's when our schedule starts. And so some people had synchronous classes meeting at 7 in the morning. And then students were telling other faculty like, well, my family's sleeping. I can't, I can't have my camera on, or somebody's in the room next to me, right? So there was all of that going on. And this becomes the big debate, and even generally about whether to have synchronous or asynchronous classes. Now, some faculty I know really feel very strongly that synchronous is the way to go because you're engaging students online and they need to see, like they need to sort of be part of this community. Others are opting for asynchronous because they feel really strongly that, like, it's an equity thing and that this way students can sort of do it at their own pace. Plus it makes a faculty member can prepare things in advance. So it's raising a lot of issues. And now Cal State is going completely virtual in the fall. So we're prepping now this summer actually. And faculty are making individual decisions about synchronous versus asynchronous, but it raises a lot of questions.
And maybe the group, and Heather, after, please feel free to jump in. I was just thinking maybe in a month or so, maybe the group can host a conversation specific about online learning and what folks like maybe sharing some ideas and things like that. Heather, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask Erica if there's any kind of organized conversation with faculty about how to make these classes more student friendly. Hopefully someone's guiding them rather than just like randomly, because that's what happened is we all just made our own decisions, and like some people made great decisions, others made terrible decisions. So but it also comes back to the article a little bit, right? Of so if we're going to really frame this if we're going to take this first gen lens through folks who are trying to figure out their own racism, figure out their own biases, figure out how they're doing things, how are institutions helping them do that so that we can better support students and deal with our own defensiveness or our own inability to see things.
Yeah. I believe, Courtney, you probably have to close this out because I believe this was set for an hour and a half and we're coming on like last 30 seconds. Well, she waved me off, but this was it's just a step, right? Just the first step. Part of it is just sort of us acknowledging where we are, and there might be some commonalities, but I'll definitely be sure to arrange another kind of conversation in a couple of weeks just to, like Heather said, get at how can we plan? And maybe I'll invite students particularly to share with us their experience too. But listen, y'all, I appreciate you taking time on a Friday to do this, have this conversation. Hope you do something to acknowledge Juneteenth today if you haven't done so already. All right. Take care, guys. It's good seeing you. I'll share the link too.
Bye, y'all. So wonderful.